All right, can you hear me over there in the corner? Do I sound okay? Perfect. Hi, my name's Ray, and I'm a web dev. And I've learned a lot of things from attending previous js.las. In fact, most all of the 10 secrets to writing perfect code that I'm going to tell you tonight have previously been covered at js.la. So here we go. Number 1, practice. Practice, practice, practice. Just like everything else in life that's challenging and rewarding, you need to practice. So you can practice with online tools like Node School, or you can attend the upcoming Node School, or you can do things like HackerRank. You can also work on side projects. That's a great way to practice and stretch your skill set. Another great experience that makes you learn is to break stuff. You're supposed to laugh. Okay, another thing that makes you learn is to break stuff, because then you get to practice putting it back together. So one thing that I'm practicing is implementing the patterns of early returns and sensible defaults. Okay, this slide is what not to do. This slide is a better example. In the first slide, if you're given an argument value red, the function still performs an extra check to see if you can match on the color green. We can do better. By using an early return, when I call this function with the parameter red, we skip that second conditional, and we win with more efficiency. Also, you'll notice in this first sample, we would return an empty string if we got an argument that wasn't either red or green. That's less than ideal. So in slide 2, we'll use a sensible default, and we'll return plant, which is more descriptive than an empty string. Another technique that I'm practicing is brevity for the sake of clarity. This function is actually relatively short and sweet. This one is more. Okay, number 1 done. On to 2. Find and recognize patterns. What's a pattern? The Google Dictionary definition of a pattern is a model or design that's used as a guide. Patterns match a sample. Design patterns are habits and practices that other software devs have identified as being effective. You've probably brushed up on design patterns for job interviews, right? Am I right? That's where you hear about them. Okay. The goal of finding patterns is to stock a mental store of sample solutions to problems so that when you encounter them, you can use what you know as a frame of reference. So in particular, I want to mention 2 JavaScript patterns, modules and microservices. The characteristics of a module using the module pattern are that a module is independent, it is self-contained, and it is hopefully reusable. So how do you know a module? You'll know when you see it because it will probably use the keywords module.export. Yes, modules are the fundamental building blocks of our world. Like we call them the core modules. Microservices value focused products and services over more monolithic projects. These small contained units of functionality are more composable and are able to be reused in meaningful and reactive ways. We'll hear more about modules and microservices as we explore the other secrets. So knowing the patterns that we have here, modules and microservices, they afford us ultimate flexibility, which brings us to our 3rd secret, rules. Rules outline desired behaviors and improve the likelihood of good outcomes. Standards, style guides, and coding conventions are types of rules that can be as specific as the usage of spacing or as high level as font and color requirements. Like you might have heard of, and I currently use JS Standard at my work. So agreeing on rules lessens the cognitive work of a dev when they're reading the code. Some general rules of thumb are to match new additions to the surrounding code. Also, use meaningful names. Well, what enforces these rules? Hello, elephant made of dryer lint. A linter is what enforces coding convention rules. So, linting is the process of running a program to analyze code for errors and rule exceptions. Linters help keep code clean and readable, which brings us to secret number 4. You were all waiting for this all month, right? Okay, secret number 4, read code. Personally, no, right? Some people, this is controversial. Personally, if I'm curious, I'm likely to try to find something to read. An article with code samples is great. The first page of the GitHub repo, okay. Possibly the example files or the index. So I like to read code. Reading code is an obvious way to learn syntax and discover new approaches to problems. The goal of code reading is to observe patterns and techniques and learn to recognize when they're useful. Ways I also might try to internalize what I'm seeing is to visualize it by drawing diagrams, making flowcharts, or writing stories or use cases. So I would read the package.json and the README to get a high-level perspective. And then also, if I was encountering a new project that was actually a live production project, I would look for and scan the configs, because the configs might share details about dependencies between systems. This is a joke, you guys. Upcoming, a joke. Configs hold all the keys. Okay, thanks. I really wanted to hear a laugh. Okay, on to number 5, functional programming. I'm also working on writing functions without side effects, functions that are immutable and stateless. Functional programming is about composability and using small pieces that do one thing well. All right, these 2 slides might help us conceptualize this. The turtles from XKCD are just one of the multiple comics of turtles that are probably the most eloquent expression that helped me understand how to think functionally. So here's the code. Pretend that this is the pile of turtles. The bottom turtle would say, meow. The next turtle would say arf, because it was called. And then the cat turtle, or the bird turtle, would say tweet. And then the next one, what would happen? We'd get back to the cat. And that's as far as we have in the picture. But you could imagine that the next turtle that could be added would be a dog, and then a bird, and then a cat, and then a dog, and then a bird. And you could basically build a ladder tall enough to paint a house by imagining that each turtle is a different function. So can you see how this chain of functions is a powerful way to encapsulate logic? In the same way that products and services in an ecosystem are meaningful together, pure functions are purposefully simple building blocks that can accomplish complicated objectives in a really concise way. For a great deep dive, see Carefully Composed Logic, which was a js.la talk in the early part of 2015. Okay, fine. Functional programming was really fun. Next secret. Comment and document. All right, actually, comments are a lie. Do not believe everything you read in the comments. Very probably, they're a remnant of an earlier dev. Possibly your past self trying to figure stuff out. Do write comments if you think it's going to help you, but if you write comments, don't insult yourself in the comments because someone else might be reading them, but more importantly, your future self is now in charge of handling insults. Some of the best commentary is found outside of the code, inside of versioning control. With Git, the commit history gives context about who, when, and what was going on when any given line was added or modified. So now we're beginning to talk about documentation, which is sometimes an afterthought. One way to get documentation done is to consider reusing the example that you're building for development. You need some way to test your code, no matter what. You're doing something, so this can be a unit test or an example that you could then convert to the README. Unit tests are a developer's favorite type of documentation, and last month's js.la featured a talk on unit tests by Sarah Rosh, so if you want to learn more, go look that up. If you're on a team and you haven't got any documentation at all, and you are also using GitHub, a really easy way to begin documenting is to use the wiki feature. I also want to mention, while we're talking about documentation, this interactive documentation that is kind of blending services and documentation, and that's a Swagger tool, is something that's out there. So there's 3 levels of documentation I wanted to quickly cover. On the method level, you should write down the expected inputs and outputs. On the module level, you should include usage examples. And on the product level, for the project level, you want to include environment details, just like what you would want in a bug report. Also, instructions for how to get a new instance up and running. Would you believe it? We're already up to the 7th secret. Kiss, dry, or die. All right, KISS, y'all know what that stands for. Keep it simple, silly. That's not what you thought I was going to say, right? But really, really simple takes practice. What's easier than copying code? If you copy and paste something, that's pretty simple. It's pretty simple to do, and honestly, that is also just fine. Sometimes it's perfect and will be all you ever need to do. But if you find you have to maintain duplicate code, you're probably going to end up doing a refactor, because the golden rule is die or dry. Don't repeat yourself, also known as duplication is evil. The reasons for this are that one version is more maintainable, and it's easier to reason about well-abstracted code. So there is a tension between what's easy and what's good. The secret is to get it working first, then try and get it right, which may include abstraction. Great. Number 8, data rules. Okay, mostly all systems exist to funnel data. Some data flows are bidirectional, others aren't, but every one is unique. The group gathered here tonight has a large breadth of experience with different data sources. We've probably worked with APIs, databases, and real-time data streams like was showcased at a previous js.la, where we saw the custom Jawbone app consuming biometric data from the device. Now, I don't know if anyone here would like to share, but this is where I was going to take comments. If anybody wanted to share data war stories, now is your chance. Anyone have an especially interesting data story they'd like to share? All right, I'll tell you mine. Oh, yes, please tell me.
Nothing great. It's kind of some architecture issues. Yeah, I sent out some stuff to be taken care of by a different dev shop, and I had a function that was converting XML to JSON, and it's 20 lines of code. And somebody else came to build a dictionary to convert certain things that might change at the time. So we decided to build a dictionary on top of the function we called it crap. Bar crap equals, and then it looked at 1,000 lines of code, and then at the very end you have a 20-line function. He left it there and gave it to us.
He gave you a pile of crap. This story here, which I don't know if everyone was able to hear as well as I was, he had sent out some code and it was returned with a function called crap in it. So that's pretty exciting kind of data experience. All right. My harrowing tale of data was actually not quite my own, but another dev told me how they forced payment from a client they had a requirement to host the website on the client's servers, but they had no requirement to host the database on the client's servers, so they didn't. And then they used the hostage database to force the payment. So what I'm driving at here, which is leading into the next topic, is that your data is probably your most valuable resource. That brings up logging. You probably have volumes of valuable log data in Elk, or maybe you don't. But if you do, you're probably already reaping the benefit of standardized logs across products and services. Some of the secrets to having good logs are to write logs server-side at the beginning and end of processes. If it's a long-running process, log the process duration. Also, you should log errors and write logs on writes. It's helpful when you're looking at some generated file to be able to refer back to the logs and see what process made that write. On the client side, this is a log ingester, right? And that's not me. I wish it was. Another time, I'm going to use a chainsaw for logs. OK, on the client side, you should leave commented out console logs. I know previously I had said that comments are lies, but this is the exception. Console log comments are great. They are my favorite kind of comment. It tells you, here once was debugging. But do make sure if you leave these logs that you comment the line out. It's not polite to leave messy trails in the inspector. All right, and we've reached number 10, the end. The secret here is to listen to your audience. Identify stakeholders and find out how they interact with the code to learn their expectations. We know that there are 3 audiences for code, like Git, developers, and the CPU. There's really only one audience for products. That's the users. So to play nicely with stakeholders, use their terms and names. Or if they have really bad names and terms, feed them good names and terms so that you can develop a common vocabulary. Before I close this listicle adventure, I want to make sure that we share a sufficiently broad definition of audience, because we have a legal and ethical requirement to give blind people and other people who are differently abled access to the World Wide Web. If you want to work on the if you do work on the consumer-facing side of a product, the Bureau of Internet Accessibility offers a free accessibility grading service. But if you want to make your website immediately more accessible, the top tip is to include a skip navigation button before the page nav to save screen readers the monotony of reading the menu again and again. So, to wrap up, these are the 10 no longer secret tips which I found useful in trying to create perfectly good code. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Ray?
I'll put them up there for sure. I didn't do that yet, but I will do that before I go home.
Yeah, we'll put them in the Slack as well.
Yeah, I'll put them in the Slack first. Great.
All right, give it up for Ray.
This is awesome. So, like I said, my name is Aman. I studied physics at the University of Cincinnati. I now work for this company, Datazar. And before I get into D3 and the awesomeness of D3, I want to talk to you guys about what we do a little bit so we can get a little context. So Datazar is a research collaboration or data collaboration platform. We allow people to upload data, analyze it, make visualizations, stuff like that, and then share it back to whoever uploaded the data. So you can kind of see context. And I guess this is not working.